Hello, and welcome to Mystic Artistry Podcast. I am Susan, and this is a space for reflection where we explore creativity, nature, intuition, and the quiet language that lives beneath words. There is always something moving beneath us, not loudly, not visibly, but constantly. Beneath our words, beneath our thoughts, beneath even what we think we can feel, there is a quieter current. And most of the time, we don't even notice it. Because we've learned to focus on what's obvious, what's spoken, and what is explained, and what's easy to name. Even something as simple as, "How are you?" Or, "How was your day?" They sound like open questions, but most of the time they're not. We've learned to answer them quickly. Good. Fine. Busy. Long. And the conversation moves on. But beneath that, there's often so much more. A whole day of experiences, interactions, moments that stayed with us, feeling we didn't quite process. And yet, we reduce all of that to a single word. Not because it isn't there, but because we've learned to stay on the surface. And over time, we get very good at answering from what is easiest to say instead of what is actually true. And sometimes, when we do begin to say more, we can feel it. The other person is hurried, distracted, already moving on to the next thing. Not unkind, just not truly there to receive it. And little by little, we learn not to go deeper. Not because we don't have more to say, but because it doesn't always feel like there's a space for it. And I think part of that is the world we are living in. Everything moves so quickly now. We're moving from one thing to the next, one conversation to another, one task to the next thing on the list. There's always somewhere to be. And even in the moments in between, we're often pulled into our phones, our thoughts, what's coming next. And without even realizing it, those small spaces where connection used to live start to disappear. Not completely, but just enough that we begin to adjust to it. We learn to keep things brief, manageable, contained, and what moves beneath has fewer places to go. I remember this so clearly from when I was teaching in the public schools. There was a bell between classes and only a short amount of time to get from one room to another. I didn't have my own classroom. I was always moving from one space to the next. And I was often in a rush, trying to get where I needed to be on time, ready, prepared. And yet, a student would stop me or a teacher would ask me something. And in these moments, I felt something else, a pull to pause, to listen, to give them the time they needed. And more often than not, I did. And I was late. But it never felt wrong because something in me knew that moment mattered. And I think about that now, how often these moments or these kinds of moments are shortened or passed by, not because we don't care, but because everything around us is moving so quickly. I've experienced what it looks like when someone truly gives us the space. I've experienced the other side of this with my uncle. Even when I was a child, he was unlike anyone I've ever known. Even when adults were speaking to him or wanting his attention, if I was talking, he would stop and he would listen. Not distracted, not rushed, not halfway, completely. He would respond thoughtfully, as if what I was saying mattered. He would even sit and have tea with me at my little tea party, completely present in it. And I remember that so vividly because it felt different. I felt seen, I felt heard, and to this day, I haven't experienced that kind of attention in quite the same way. And I think that kind of presence is part of the language we're talking about. Because beneath everything we present, everything we manage, everything we try to hold together, there is something in us that is still responsive, still alive, and it is always speaking, not in words, but in movement. So the next time something rises unexpectedly from beneath the surface, you might ask yourself, what is trying to move here that I haven't yet allowed? And just sit with that. No pressure, no urgency, just awareness. And one more thing. What if that movement beneath the surface is more honest than what we're trying to hold together above it? I notice this sometimes when I'm teaching. A student will come in, sit at the piano, say they're fine. Everything appears completely normal, and yet something feels different. Not in what they're saying, but in how they're sitting, how they're playing, how the music is moving or not moving. There's a hesitation, a subtle disconnect, a kind of holding back that isn't spoken but is very present. And I've learned not to rush past that, musically speaking. I have learned not to immediately correct the notes or focus only on the technique, because what's happening underneath is often more important than what's happening on the surface. Sometimes I'll gently ask, tell me what this feels like to you, not how it sounds, not whether it's right or wrong. And almost always, something begins to open because that current, that movement beneath was already there. It just needed space to be noticed. And this doesn't just happen in music. It happens in conversations, in relationships, in quiet moments when we're alone. Something rises, and we don't always understand why. But instead of listening, we often try to smooth it over. We return to what makes sense, what feels manageable, what keeps everything in place. And over time, we become more fluent in what we present than in what we actually feel. But the current beneath us, that never stops moving. It carries what we haven't said, what we haven't processed, what we haven't allowed ourselves to feel. And it doesn't disappear just because we don't acknowledge it. It waits. And sometimes it finds its way through in ways we don't expect. In emotion, in reaction, in silence. We have a choice We can push it back down, explain it away, return to what is comfortable and known. Or we can pause, not to fix it, not to understand it immediately, but simply to notice something is moving. And maybe that movement is not something to control. Maybe it's something to listen to. Because beneath everything we present, everything we manage, everything we try to hold together, there is something in us that is still honest, still responsive, still alive. And it is always speaking, not in words, but in movement. Because what moves beneath you is not separate from you. It is you. And maybe it's not that we've lost the ability to connect, but that we've lost the space that allows it. And if something in this resonated, you don't need to hold on to it. Just let it sit, settle, and see what stays. As always, I am listening,